Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.College. Recently, there have been a lot of advancements to Unity's new input system. I spent some time diving into it and playing around with the system, and I think it's really cool. So in this video, I'm going to show you what's different about it, why I think it's better, and how you can use it in your own projects. To demonstrate this new system, I've set up a sample project where I can control a spaceship using W, A, S, and D. I can fire hitting control, or hold down space to rapid fire. I've even added a self-destruct mechanism where I can hold down Q, wait a little while, and explode. Of course, if I hold it down and release, it stops. And all of this works with the new input system. So let's see how it's all tied together. The first thing we need to do, though, is stop playing, and we need to pull in the input system. So if you haven't done this yet, you'll need to go to Window, and then go to Package Manager, and you need to find the input system. This won't show up by default, though. You need to go to Advanced and make sure that Show Preview Packages is on. Of course, once this is out of preview, it'll just be there, but this will probably be way outdated by then. So here we go. Check Show Preview Packages and install this input system. Just hit Install. I've got a remove option because I've already got it there. The next thing you need to do is go to the project settings. So we go to Edit, go to Project Settings, and in our project settings, which actually is right here, you'll see that there's now an input and an input new. Under input new, this will be empty. If you haven't already created one, in fact, let's just delete mine right now and show you. So we delete it, and it'll say no asset, and we just need to create a new input setting. So I just hit new and give it a name. It doesn't really matter from what I can tell, and since it's a throwaway demo, it doesn't matter at all. So now I've created this new input test2.input settings. Without that here, it's not going to work. So make sure you've done that. And then I wanted to point out the supported devices section because this caught me up the first time through here. If you read the description, which I kind of skipped past the first time, you see that if you just leave this empty, it'll work with all devices. As soon as you add a device to it, it's now filtered to only work with devices in that list. A blank list just means everything, so we're going to leave it blank. The next step is to create an action map. So go right click and go to UI or create and go to input actions. And we should give this a name like controls or player controls. You can see I had named one player controls previously. Let's just name this controls. And then I'm going to delete this old source file that was there. Now select this and you'll see that there's an edit asset button. Of course, we can also double click on it. And it should pop up this little input manager control editing window. I'm going to dock it. And I want to point out a couple parts to it. First, there are 3 tabs. We've got action maps, actions, and properties. And you see that actions, it doesn't do anything if I click on it. Nothing happens over here at all. The only thing I can really interact with is action maps. So I'm going to add a new action map. And I'm going to name this ship because I want to control a spaceship. I gave it a capital S because I've already got one with a lowercase. And these are case sensitive and they will conflict eventually if you're not careful. So I've named mine ship. This is going to be for controlling the ship. If we wanted to add another action map, well, why would we do that? Perhaps for a game where we're flying a spaceship around and we land on a planet and then we want to go to a different type of control scheme, or maybe we have a mini game or something else where we want to change the way input works. And then what we can do is just swap out the action map or call into the other one instead. But for this game, we only need one, so we'll just add a single ship. Then I'll add an action. And under our actions, let's start with fire. We'll start with fire. And underneath fire, if I select it first, I want to show the properties. Properties shows basically what the inspector would show, but just for these actions. So if we look here, there's a type option. It defaults to any when we add a default action like this. I started off by putting these as buttons. In a little while, though, we're going to change it over to an axis, and I'll show you why. But for now, we're going to make it just a button. And I'll go to the binding that was automatically created underneath it and then give this a value. So if I click right here, I can just start typing and search for a button or a key, for example. So type like left control and left control pops up. I can also hit plus and add another binding. Just get another basic one here. And I can hit this little search box. And now I can actually just press a key. And it will read that key. Now I have run into a case a couple of times where I was doing this and it kept reading my scroll wheel as the key. So if it's not working, you see a scroll wheel or something else, don't be too surprised. It is still very alpha, I think, and things are going to be broken, things will break, and you may run into issues. Just expect it and kind of figure it out and play around with it. So we've got our action set up. We've got 2 bindings set up for it. There are also some interactions here. I'm going to show these in just a little bit. But the way it works right now is that our fire action is going to be called whenever we press left control or press space. So let's create a really simple script to just read this, see what it looks like, and then start turning it into an actual spaceship. So to do that, I'm just going to right click, go create a C# script, and I'll just call this fire tester. It's just going to test that our fire button is working real quick and show you how to hook up that fire button. So we go into here, and we can get rid of update and start, and I'm just going to add an on enable. And then in here, I need a reference to this control. So let's go back into the Unity project for one moment and get an idea of what it is that we want to get a reference to. So go to our project and go into this assets folder, the root assets, and we had our controls right here. If you look at controls, you'll see that it has a generate C# class option on here. I'm going to check this. And then I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to leave all of these blank. It's important though, if you do create a class name and a file name, make sure that you put the extension on the file name here. If you leave them blank, it's just going to create one in no namespace with a matching file name and class name to the control object. So here it's just named controls, and we got a script named controls. And I can open this up, and you'll see that we don't have any reference to our fire or our ship or anything else. And the first time this happened to me, I was very confused, trying to figure out what was wrong. Then I realized there's this save asset button here, and I hadn't remembered to press it. Once I hit that, I'll save, and here, if I go back to the project view and reselect it, let's see, go back in here, you'll see that I haven't done anything here, but it's just going to auto update. So let's go look at the script. Right here, we've got the new version of the script. We've got our ship, we've got our fire, and well, it should all work. So now I need to take this controls class name, and I want to use this in my fire tester. So I'm going to add a private field here. First, I'll add the serialized field attribute. I'll do private controls. Whoops, not what I wanted. Controls. And I'll just call this underscore controls. And I'm just going to assign a reference to this. Now, in a bigger project where we have controllers that are being turned on and off, or multiple players coming in and out, we probably wouldn't want to just do a reference right here. In fact, there's an entire system set up for detecting new players, assigning controls to players, and there's a lot in the works. A lot of it's still pretty alpha and still kind of in development, and how it's going to end up, I don't really know, but it looks really exciting, and I highly recommend you check that out. So don't go in trying to create like a player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4 setup without diving really deep into their documentation and looking and seeing exactly how they're doing it, because it looks like it's coming soon and it's going to be really cool and partially works now, but I didn't want to go too deep into that since it's going to change. So let's go back to our little crappy way of doing it, where we're just going to assign the controls right in here. And I say crappy, but realistically, this will work totally fine. It'll work just fine in any game where we're not just changing out the players or anything like that. So we've got our controls reference right here, and we'll assign it in a moment. But then in on enable, I want to do underscore controls dot, and then just take a look at what I've got. The main thing that I care about is ship actions, or this ship. So I do dot ship, and then if I do dot again, you should see that I have fire now. And this maps up right here to our ship and our fire. When we generate this class, it's essentially generating this a class for the ship and this fire. It may be doing structs or something, or properties underneath. I'm not really sure. In fact, well, let's just hit F12 and go look. It actually generated a ship actions. There we go. And then underneath the ship actions, it must have the fire. So here we've got a reference to our fire action, and I'm going to do dot performed right there. So this is an event callback that I'll get. So what'll happen is whenever fire happens, performed will be invoked, or anything registered to listen to performed will be invoked. So to register for it, we just do plus equals, and then we give it a method name. I'm used to Visual Studio where I just hit tab a couple times and it would auto-generate them. I've been using Writer lately, so we're going to actually type out the method name, and I'll call this like handle fire. Put a semicolon there, and then I'll go back over, Alt-Enter, and just create the method. And it's going to automatically give me a method that takes in a callback context with a terribly named variable for it that I'll rename to context. And it's going to throw an exception in there. But all I really want to do in here is maybe write a log. So I'll just do debug.log fire. So this will show that whenever we do the fire action, what should happen is that this performed will get called, handle fire will be called, and the debug.log of fire will happen. One other thing that's important to note too, if we're registering for events, if this object isn't going to be all around for the entire life of the game, like maybe we're loading levels or whatever, and it needs to get disposed sometime, we need to make sure that we clean these event registrations up. So what I do for that is just copy our on enable, paste it down here, and do on disable, and then here we change this plus to a minus. So what's going to happen is it's going to on enable, register for this event, on disable, deregister for the event. This prevents memory leaks, essentially. It allows the things to collect and also prevents this handle fire from being called after this object is supposed to be destroyed. So I want to try this out, but I also want to note that it's not going to work because there's something missing. So let's give it a shot, though, and make sure that I'm right about that. So I'll hit clear, and I'm just going to create let's go with a brand new blank empty scene. And I'm going to put my fire tester, I'll just throw it directly onto the main camera. We're only going to do this for a moment. And then I'll take the controls and drop that into the controls section. Now, if I go to my game view and show the console, when I hit play, you might expect that when I hit left control or space, we'll see something in the log. Oh, I don't want to maximize on play. Let's uncheck that. Okay, so let's hit control and see what happens. Smacking it, nothing. Hitting space, nothing happens. So again, this caught me off guard the first time. The issue is that we need to call controls.ship.fire.enable. This is going to enable this event. And I could even call disable, I believe, in the on disable if I wanted to. So that way the event won't even be called again. So even if I were registered for it, it'd still be an issue. Still wouldn't want to do it, but it won't at least get fired off when we don't have our fire tester around. So let's try one more time. We'll go back in, hit play, and as I hit control and space, we should start to see debug logs appear. There we go. Look at that. So I'm going to hit clear real quick and hit it one more time because I want to show you something. Notice that it went in twice. Watch me hold it down and then release. So there you go. It's actually calling this action twice. We're getting this event 2 times, which could be an issue because we don't really want to fire 2 bullets at the same time, right? Why is it doing that? Well, let's take a look. If we go to our controls and we look at our left control, the interactions list right now is set to empty. So if I want to only do this when they press the button, I'd have to select press. If I want to do it only when they do a tap, I'd select tap, and so on. I could even do a press and release so that it doesn't fire off until I release it. In fact, let's do that. So for left control, we'll leave it on press, and for space, we'll choose press and release. And now I need to remember to hit save asset. Also important to note, changing these while you're playing doesn't do anything, or at least it doesn't work. It won't update things live. Okay, so let's hit left control. There we go. I'm letting go now. Nothing. And I'll hold space. Oh, I hit it too fast. So as I go down, nothing. Release, and then we get the fire. So that's how we would do like a fire on release or a fire on press down. All pretty simple so far, right? But let's dive into something a little bit more complicated. Let's do some movement now. So I'm going to go into my action maps, or actually not my action maps. I want to go to my actions, and I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to name this move. Now, I don't want this default empty binding, so I'm just going to delete it. I'll right click and hit delete, and I'll hit the plus, and I want to create a composite D-pad. This gives me up, down, left, and right movements. So for up, I'll bind this to W. For down, let's use the hotkey one. We'll go to S, left we'll go to A, and right we'll go to D. Pretty cool. That gives us our WASD, so I'm going to rename this to WASD. And then we could also do arrows or game pads or something. Say we wanted to add in another composite D-pad. We could do something like arrows, and then set up all the arrows for this. I'm not going to do it right now because I think you understand, and it's kind of a waste of time. But we've got our WASD here. We've got everything set up. Now let's make it actually move. Now to do that, I don't want to just go through and write a whole script in front of you because I think it's kind of slow and might waste your time. So instead, we're going to go right into this example version that I have set up. So we'll go right down here, go to the sample scene. We can save this off. Just throw away scene. Okay, so here I've got my spaceship set up, and I've got an input tester script on here. And this will work fine with our existing action map, but I've created a slightly different action map that I want to show you. So let's go ahead and save that one off, and we'll go into our input actions action map. So this one, again, you see, it's pretty much the same. Here I've got lowercase instead of Pascal case on these things. I've got a fire that's set up as a button. I've got a move. Something a little bit different about this, though. And this is something else that also caught me up for a little while. My move type is not set to any. It defaulted to any. I changed it to vector 2. This is going to give me just a nice vector of X and Y for my D-pad, which is what you would expect when you normally read like a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. We're just getting it in a vector instead of two separate floats. So we've got our movement for our, it's named D-pad. Let's name this WASD. And then we've got some rapid fire and the self-destruct stuff that you saw just a little while ago. Pretty cool. Let's see how it all works now in code. So we'll go into our player ship. This is that ship that you saw moving around at the beginning of the video. And underneath it, by the way, is just the child. It's just a model of a ship that's rotated and scaled down. Absolutely nothing special there. All of the code is right here. So we've got our input tester script, which probably should be named a spaceship or something, but I didn't know what it was going to be when I started it, and I didn't refactor it properly. So our input tester script has a couple fields on it. It's got a bullet prefab, obviously for spawning bullets, an explosion particle for spawning our explosion particle, a speed for how fast it moves, and an input actions for our controls. Now I named this completely different from our other one, and it's for good reason, because the name controls here I think could be confusing. You might think like this is some static class or some built-in thing. It was just the name of the thing that we created. In the other example here, let's go back to it. I named it input actions. So we have an input actions. In assets, again, we had controls. So we got a controls script. So we have our input actions script. Let's see if I can get back to that right here. And it's just named controls because this is actually our controls. Really confusing naming, right? Well, hopefully it makes sense now though. So in our on enable, the first thing I'm doing here is caching all of these renderers, and you can see I've added a note. It's for the self-destruct, essentially so I can flash those things really fast when they get into self-destruct mode. And then we've got a call for our fire.performed, calls into handle fire, so we're just registering that event, and calling enable to enable the fire event. And if we look at our handle fire method, it instantiates a bullet prefab at our position and our rotation. Now the bullet itself handles just moving forward, and literally it just moves forward at a set speed. It doesn't do anything else. So that's the entirety of our shooting script, or our shooting code right there, or at least the basic version of it. But now we're going on to move. So we've got our move performed registered to handle move. Oh, this is not right. It should be handle move. Let's fix that. Not handle move horizontal. Initially, I was doing them separate, and then I realized doing it all wrong and that they should be done together with a vector 2. So we've got this ship.move.performed plus equals handle move. And I want to look at this because this is somewhat interesting, I think. Handle move takes in this context, which was automatically, of course, generated. So when I did the plus equals, I typed handle move, hit Alt-Enter, and it just auto-generated that. But if you look here at the performed and look at the tooltip, you'll see that the action type, or the parameter that we're going to get from this action, is a callback context. That's what's inside those two arrows. So we've got our handle move here, and in it we call context.readValue, and we read a vector 2, and we store this in the move axis vector 2. So that's right up here, this private field called move axis. And then I just log some stuff, just logging out the value of that move axis. In fact, if we go in and play, you could probably see that. Let's do it. Let's go into play mode and watch it real quick, because oops, clicking on the wrong thing there. Let's see if Jason can learn how to click. Okay, so here we go. We hit play, and We move around. Look at the log right here. Let's go to the console log. Let's clear this. Kind of make it bigger. So you see I'm holding up and left, I hold up and right, or just right, we get 1. Hold just down, we're getting -1. Just left, we're getting -1 here on the X. Down it was on the Y, and so on. So you can see that we're getting the right values for the axis and logging them out right here. And then we're also moving the ship. So where are we moving the ship? Because you probably didn't see us actually moving it. Well, we're just setting the move axis, and then in update, when realistically we'd probably want to just move this in fixed update, do some physics-based movement or something else that handles all of this stuff. Instead, we've done a very sloppy, just quick, dirty implementation of just moving the position by a new vector 3. That is the amount of the, here, let's separate these parameters out. It's the X value of the move axis times speed times delta time, and then 0 for the Y, and then for the Z, we just move on the Y axis of our move axis, because we're only getting a vector 2 back. And then, well, what's this next part here? Let's look at this. Line 60. If fire down, instantiate a bullet prefab. Oh, you might be wondering what this is. Why is there a fire down? We already handled fire. This is that auto fire, the rapid fire stuff that we're getting from holding down space. Let's go back into game real quick. Hit play. I just want to show it and then show you how I'm doing it and how it works. And again, I'm not sure it's the best way to do it, but it's the way that I figured it out. So here you see all the bullets flying off and going. By the way, very important to note that if you're doing this in a real project, you don't want to just spawn all of these bullets. Of course, you'll want to use some sort of a pooling system. I think that's way beyond the scope of this video, and I've got plenty on it. So if you're interested in that, just do a quick search. So we've got our rapid fire. How is this working? Well, our rapid fire performed calls handle rapid fire. Let's take a look at it. Handle rapid fire reads a float from this context here that's named badly again. Let's rename this to context. So we've got our context, and we read a float, and then we just set fire down to true if the value is greater than or equal to 0.9. We do like a if the value is 1, but imagine we have a trigger or something. We may want to add a little bit of dead space in there. In fact, I think we can do that outside of here. We don't necessarily need to do that in code, but I wasn't quite sure how the right way to do it was, so I just did it right in here. So we just check, and we set fire down to the value being greater than 0.9. So basically, if it's on. So how does that work, though? Let's take a look at the action map, because it's set up a little bit different for our rapid fire. So if we go to our input actions, and go to rapid fire, look at the type here. So fire is set to button. Rapid fire is actually set to an axis. So it's going to give us back a value from 0 to 1, depending on whether or not the button is pressed down. So really it's going to be 0 or 1 because it's a keyboard. But imagine it was like a thumbstick or something like that, or not a thumbstick, a bumper button, or the trigger buttons, where we could get back a value that's on an axis. We want to do the same thing here, because our event is going to call both when we pull it down and when we release it. Because remember, let's go right here. We don't have an interaction set up here, so it's not only filtering to press or press and release. Whenever we press or release it, it's calling, and it's going to give us back the value there in that axis. So we're setting fire down to true or false, and then in update, if fire down is true, we just spam out those bullets. All pretty simple, right? The last thing that I have in here is the self-destruct, and I thought this was interesting because it uses the hold mechanism. It uses a start and a cancel and a perform. So if we look at our self-destruct, it's got started, canceled, and performed. So in start, we just call into this start destruct method, which just kicks off this blink coroutine. It runs on forever and then turns all the color or the colors child renderers red, waits a tenth of a second, makes them white. That's it. That's how they're blinking. They're just blinking on and off. So when we start destruction, we start that coroutine. When we cancel, that's, well, when we call this method right here, which finds the coroutine if it's not null, stops it, and then changes all the renderers back to white in case they'd happen to end on a red flash. Now, if you're not used to this coroutine syntax and you're used to doing it by string, I recommend that you make the switch and go this way. Try to avoid string coroutines in general. Just store them as a coroutine reference. Let's go to F12 on this blink routine. You see that it's just a type coroutine, and we're just assigning it a value. It will be null by default, so until we've actually assigned it a value, this code won't happen and we don't have a problem. And then when it's got a value, it's fine. It stops it and it finds the right thing. The final thing in here is the destruct, which is pretty simple. It just instantiates an explosion particle, stops the blinking, and sets it to white. The cooler part, though, is right down here. The only thing that makes this special, or makes it so that I have to hold it or hold it for some amount of time, is this hold interaction right here. With a duration set to 3, it'll just work. So as long as I hold it for 3 seconds, it'll explode. If I hold it, it'll start. And if I release before the 3 seconds, I'll get that canceled call. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of having the duration right here in the controls for a spaceship self-destruct. It may not make a lot of sense. Like, that seems like it'd be a ship-specific setting. But I think that there are a lot of cases that you could use this hold for. In fact, basically anything where the duration's not going to vary by some state of the game. Plus, we could also, I think, set up these interactions in code and adjust them in code if we needed to as well. All right, so this input system is pretty cool. I really like the way that it abstracts away the controls and puts everything into a nice simple mapping system, and that it's way better than the old default. But there are some things that, well, might be a little bit harder to use, and you may be wondering, how do I get to them? Luckily, if you look at the documentation on the GitHub page for this, you'll see that we've actually got code access to just about everything. If you want to access something from the keyboard, you can call keyboard.current. The actual key name and see if it was pressed, for instance. You can check to see if anything was pressed. You can find all of the game pads. You can read the mouse, the gyroscope, and everything else. Just start to go through this documentation. Maybe look at the migrate from old input system stuff as well. It's got the new way to do things, or an event-driven way to do a lot of things that you would normally do by just constantly polling. So if you're looking at implementing this into your own game, I would probably hold off a little while, maybe experiment with it, try it out a little bit, and just wait until it's final and shipped, or at least until 19.1 when it's into an actual release build and pretty close to steady and stable, which I think it's not too far away. So I'm excited to start using this in my projects coming in 2019. I'm curious to see if you guys have any thoughts on this system as well. If there's something that you think is missing or that I should have covered that I didn't. I'm sure that there are plenty of things in the system that are just really awesome, like the new player mapping. That system seems like it's going to be amazing and really cool. It's just not very documented, and I think it's still very alpha right now. But like I said, I'm super excited for it. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, please. I really appreciate it, and share with your friends. And also, a special thanks to all the Patreon supporters. It's been growing over time, and really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Thanks again for watching. If you have requests for videos or anything else, just drop them in a comment below.